Wildland Urban Interface is a simple term, but a very complex reality. These parts of territory in which wild vegetation, houses and infrastructures mix together or enter in contact are potentially threatened by forest fires. Wildfires approaching the Wildland Urban Interface are scenarios where flames, smoke and flying embers affect population, properties and services. These are very complex situations for firefighters and other civil protection agencies, particularly in the case of large fires, affecting several housing areas simultaneously. Large and highly destructive fires are becoming commonplace in Europe as a consequence of climate evolution and land use change. Under such premise, self-protection and prevention against forest fires is paramount for a society increasingly demanding such spaces. Prevention in the Wildland Urban Interface means the transformation of the landscape at 3 levels, so to provide an environment for controlled risk. And this has to be done in advance. Indeed, prevention conveys the consideration and use of 3 spatial scales. The macro scale, when we look at the landscape level. The mesoscale, which is the settlement or condominium level. And the micro scale, which is the lot and house level. The transformation of the landscape requires first the identification of fuel distribution and continuity and the potential fire scenarios. Fuel treatments include the reduction and control of fuel load and continuity, particularly in the critical points where the fire increases its activity. This is achieved by the elaboration and sustained implementation of management plans of forested but also agricultural lands. In the mesoscale, the domain of the settlement, 3 different parts are considered: the internal pattern of houses and vegetation, the perimeter of the settlement, and the external land structure surrounding it. Prevention measures seek to transform this tissue into a transition zone of firefighting opportunity, which is adapted to the path of the fire. These include the fuel control, the improvement of ground accessibility, and the increase of water availability. The vegetation inside the settlement plays a remarkable role in the way that the impacting fire progresses through it, how spot fires are generated, and eventually how fires reaching each of the lots and houses. Accumulation of fuels in the undeveloped lots and the presence of edges are both key factors of fire spread within the mesoscale. Based on the expected radiation and the threshold of maximum energy flow allowed to be received by firefighters in a given point, which is about 7 kilowatts per square meter, it is possible to identify the extent and intensity of the required fuel treatment in the internal, perimeter and external mesoscale. It can be observed that some gardens fully packed with fuel make very difficult or even impossible to defend the house. Actually, there is no defensible space from which operates safely and effectively. The microscale is the domain of the homeowner and much can be done. The garden is definitely a prevention opportunity by limiting the amount of fine fuel load, by controlling the moisture of the live fuel, and by fuel understore load control. Live fuel moisture in the vegetation is tightly linked to the irrigation routines and the gardening treatments performed by owners and gardeners. Hedges play a key role in increasing or decreasing the fire intensity and in the flame propagation to other lots. The ignition of hedges and other vegetation close to the house do frequently entail its affection or even its destruction. With all this information, a risk assessment process based on the role of the surrounding vegetation and its contribution to the expected energy release, complemented with an on-the-ground assessment, which is a survey of other materials and objects and particularities of each house, it's performed for the risk assessment of each house. Based on this assessment, the prevention plan should be designed and implemented by homeowners and the community as a whole. Risk awareness of the community is the success of prevention in the Wildland Urban Interface. Remember that prevention is a common effort.